I am Sheltem, guardian of Terra. Twice now you have defeated my test, thinking yourself worthy of invading my world. Walk carefully then through this third challenge, and take heed your final decision is truly what you desire. For the course of destiny cannot be turned once set in motion. Until our next meeting, mortals.
Hello and welcome to Might and Magic 3, Isles of Terra. So it's the third game in the Might and Magic series, a series of role-playing games, and it is in fact the first game from the second generation of Might and Magic games. That means it has an entirely reworked engine, not associated with the one used in Might and Magic 1, Secret of the Inner Sanctum, or Might and Magic 2, Gates to Another World. And this new engine is quite nice indeed. In fact, this game is my favorite from the whole second generation of Might and Magic games. So, in this video I will just go over how I have everything set up at the moment. Well, not everything. The graphics and the processor settings that I have, they're not entirely what I would like them to be, but they're as close as it gets to what I want to have. And so I will show you how I have it set up so you could replicate everything. In the second video I will show how I have set the music and also a bit of history about music in general at the time of release of this game. As you can see, it was released in 1991, which was a very unfortunate timing, because that was just barely before things got standardized. But, like I said, more about that a bit later. In the third video I will go over the manual of the game, which is actually very unique in, I don't know, a bit of a good sense and a bit of a bad sense, but you'll see that as well. And in the fourth video, things will actually start. So, starting off, let's first go into the game, start a new game, but this will only be a test one, just to show you how things actually look. So, test. And at the moment, for the processor settings, I have it set to 4000 cycles, which you can see there are some loading times. And there we are in game. This music is amazing. But yes, the 4000 cycles means it's fairly okay-ish. You can see that the mouse is a bit laggy, unless I go into the person's skill list, where everything is fine. Some things are a bit slow, as you could see there, loading times, and if you enter something, like this tavern here, the animation speed is a bit fast. I would like if it was slower. I think this game isn't actually meant to have a static cycle count. It was somehow made that the things where things are loading, it would go faster, and where things are just animating, it would go slower. But I think 4000 is a fairly okay compromise. 3000 gives you correct animations, I think, but it's really sluggish. I don't really like that. Then we have the graphics setup. At the moment, what I have enabled is aspect ratio correction. And that's a bit of a problem, actually, because looking at the UI, I think those who created the game didn't actually communicate with each other, and so some things are meant for when aspect ratio is corrected, and some other things are made for when it's not. So for instance, if we look at these buttons here, they are actually perfect squares, with aspect correction turned on. The minimap is pretty much square as well. If you go here, these skill icons are also square. So that makes me think that they actually wanted the compensation to be on. However, if you look at the 3D screen, and if you look at the gems here, as well as these gems, they look correct when it's not corrected for the aspect ratio. So it's something. I think the UI elements that are not in the 3D view are supposed to look in one setting, and the rest is supposed to look in the other, which isn't of course possible. The deciding factor for me in why I do have the correction turned on is that if you move the mouse around, as you can see, the mouse does, well, fairly okay circles. If you don't have correction on, the mouse would do ovals, very, very prominent ovals. Going up and down would be much harder than going left to right. So that is the deciding factor for me. So I would probably recommend having that on, but of course if you do want these things to be correctly shown, then you might want it off. For the 3D elements in the world, I'm not really sure if they are stretched out or not. Some things might look that, but others don't. So yeah. This looks quite right. This looks quite right too, so beats me. So yes, that is that. Another thing I wanted to show is how I am starting this game. I'm actually using the Dosbox game launcher. It's cross-platform. At the moment I'm recording everything on Linux, which is awesome. And the Dosbox game launcher is cross-platform, so you can use it on Windows if you want as well. So like I said, in the machine options I have 4000 cycles set up. Everything is on auto. These are defaults as far as I remember. Nothing did any difference when I tried to change things around, so I don't think you need to mess around with it. More about audio later on. And, oh yeah, so display is what I wanted to talk more about. I have the scaler set to normal 3x. This makes so that all the pixels are 3 times as big as it was originally. Now, the original window resolution is 320 on 200. It's super small, I'm recording this on 960 on 720, so 3 times that. Now in Might and Magic 2 Gates to Another World, I talked a bit about scalars, and that you can get a bit better look if you choose an appropriate scalar. The thing is, it works well when there are few colors, and so in the case of My Magic 2 Gates to Another World, it did work fairly well. However, in this game, you can see that there are quite a few colors, especially on the portraits, which exist now, unlike in previous games. So the scalars don't really work that well. And except for one, the advanced MAME, advanced interpolation, even the high quality scalars, they give pretty poor effects because they tend to make areas out of things, well, pixels that are in similar color. So they're not very fitting for this. Now what is actually quite fitting is Super 2x Say. That is fitting because that scalar actually does something a bit different with pixels. Instead of just trying to maximize the surface area and just make angles less pronounced, what it does, it blurs things out unless there is a very sharp edge. Which means that text looks fairly good. It's not blurred out that much, because there is a very sharp difference between the colors, the white and the brown. On faces, everything looks fairly good as well, because things are smoothed out properly, because the color changes aren't that huge. So that is a pretty good scalar if you want to use that. However, I'm not using that, and that is because of one thing. If you look at the list, there is Super 2x Say, but there is no Super 3x Say. And since I now have 2 monitors, having only 2 times scaling is pretty low. So that's why I'm using the normal 3x scalar. Now another thing that I thought about is the output method. There's, yeah, OpenGL, OpenGL NB. I'm currently using OpenGL. You can use Surface too. As far as I can tell, nothing really changes. Maybe OpenGL is a bit better in terms of VSync, vertical sync, yeah. Otherwise, they're quite identical. If you have it set to OpenGL and you don't have a scalar, or you have a scalar that is smaller than you want it to look like, say I could have simply no scalar, then I could select a window resolution that is 960 on 720, so that's 3 times what I want, well, the original basically. OpenGL adds its own scalar, and it's just a simple interpolation scalar. Things are simply blurred out, which is fine for a game like this, I think. The only problem is with text, because text also gets blurred out in that way. The reason why I'm not using that? Well, another thing that you could do actually is use the normal 2x scalar and then also use a set window resolution, which would sharpen some things out and then apply a bit of a blur, which is also a pretty interesting effect. But the reason why I'm not using that is because since I'm going to upload this into YouTube, and YouTube has quality selection, basically 720p means it's the thing that I see, that is normal 3x scalar, without any interpolation scalars. If you set this to 480p, you will get the equivalent of a normal 2x scaler, plus upscaling to 960 on 720 or whatever your resolution is. And if you set it to 240p, then you will get the same thing as having none as a scaler and then the window resolution of 960 on 720 or whatever your screen resolution is. So you can toggle that yourself, that's why I am just using the normal 3x scaler. It's really a pity that nobody ever made the Super 2x work with 3x scaling. And I cannot actually use Super 2x and then use that trick to scale it up to 720, because it just doesn't work. I'm not sure why, but it simply doesn't honor the window resolution anymore once I use Super 2x. So even that trick doesn't work, unfortunately. But, well, as it is, I think it looks fairly good. Alright, well, what else did I want to mention? Well, nothing comes to mind. I think I covered everything that I wanted here. So next up I will be talking about the music setup, and the music setup is quite interesting. As you can hear here, the music is very nice sounding, and with the stock Dosbox settings you cannot get a sound quite as good as that. Plus, there are sound effects that are quite amazing. There is footstep sound. That's awesome. You cannot get that with default settings. And even more. Sound effects. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So yeah, I will talk a bit more about how to set those things up in the next video, because that actually requires a bit of history. So, I will see you all in the second video. See you all then. Later.